Hello, and welcome to the Judo Way of Life podcast. If you've been with us before, welcome back, and if this is your first time listening, thank you for joining us. Today, I have the honour of talking with Brian Moore. Brian is a 7th degree black belt who has been involved in judo as a competitor and coach since the 1960s. He is head coach at the prestigious Bacup Judo Club, where he has coached numerous players to multiple European, Commonwealth and World Championships, as well as multiple Olympic Games. He was the North West of England area squad coach for 12 years, the Great Britain squad coach for the under-18s team for 15 years, and was also the support coach for the Team GB senior squad for over 10 years. Hello Brian, thank you for joining me today.
Well, it will be a pleasure as always.
I'd like to start by asking you about how you got started in judo.
Well, I worked at the coal mine at the time, and the local sports club the mine provided put on a demonstration of judo for any of the miners to take the children to have some free lessons. So I took along my brother, who was, I think, 9 at the time. I'll be 21. And the lad who was doing the demonstration, a lad called Billy Hindle and his wife, 2 black belts. There was only 2 of us turned up on the day, myself and my brother and another miner with his daughter. So Billy invited us both on the mats to have a go self. I didn't know what a character were at the time. I didn't know that he just had a fantastic character. So he invited us on. We went onto the mat, and just, I don't know, within 10 minutes I was just loving it. Because at the time we were doing near-waza, and I worked on the coal face, on my knees, shoveling coal 7 hours a day. So it was a perfect environment for me to work in. So the groundwork really attracted me. And we had a really good session with Billy. Unfortunately, the lad, the other parent, the other miner, when Billy stood us up to have a go at standing, doing a bit of standing work, I broke his ankle. We did an ankle sweep, but we were trying to do judo on 2 mattresses, I think they were. So that finished him off. And Billy invited me to go to Bacup Judo Club with him on the Monday. In fact, he came and picked me up at his home, which I thought was good of him, saying that with all respect. And it took off from there, really. I just loved it. From day one, I just loved it. I loved the camaraderie. I liked the fighting. I liked the fighting element of it, the competitive element, everything about it, really. It just absolutely suited my personality. It suited what I've been looking for. I've done no sports whatsoever in life, ever. Nothing. I've never played football, cricket, nothing. But I just took to this immediately, and so that's where it started, really.
And what year was that?
Like 1968, probably 1968. So, and I started going again to Bacup Judo Club. I started going 3 nights a week, and straight away, a very competitive club, very competitive. There was only about 7 or 8 members, really. They were all down grades apart from one, who were brown belt. There were no low grades there at all. If they'd been to the judo club, they started about 2 men had come back from the Second World War, which a lot of judo clubs had in England, actually. So you have to really stand up. You have to stand up on the counter. You have to be stand up and count because it were hard sessions, very, very hard sessions. But it just, as I say, it just suited me.
And what was the judo scene in England like at that time?
Very different to what it is today. It was harder. As I say, a lot of the people who were doing judo were sort of ex-servicemen, a lot of them, and it's attractive. There weren't that many juniors then. There were mainly seniors in clubs. There were very few juniors. I thought, oh yeah, there were juniors in our club. I couldn't even remember if there were any. I didn't see that night, not for a couple of years. And competitions that they had were pretty spaced out. They were mainly inter-club competitions more than organised national competitions. The only national competition was the British Championships and the trials, which from the trials they selected the British squads. And national teams, I think there were the only 3 national events I can remember. All the rest of the events were sort of inter-club ones, where you just visited other clubs, which was regular. There were a lot more visiting of clubs them days than there is today. And I don't think they had as many recognised coaches such as a coach running a club. If you went to a club, normally the highest downgrade just took the session. And that applied if you went to other clubs. If you went to other clubs and you were a second down, for example, and they were only first on the map, then you automatically took that session. And every session sort of started with near-wazzer. There were no warm-ups. That was the warm-up with the near-wazzer. Which things like that actually make me wonder today whether we spend far too much time on that sort of thing. There are lots of people who disagree with that, of course. I can't remember many injuries. I really can't remember many injuries happening those days. People pulling the ligaments, etc., etc. You just got down on the ground, rolled about for a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes on your warm up, and then you were at it. And then it was just randori. There were no techniques done when you went to visit other clubs. And you have to randori all the time, both near was and standing. So far harder, I would say, far harder. The judo was harder everywhere you went. You had to stand up, and you soon got to find out if you didn't really want to fight. So you'd only go to clubs where you knew each other's. We knew the clubs where you went to get a scrap, really, and didn't bother going to clubs that were just doing it. Well, I suppose fitness views or whatever, really. I don't see anything wrong with that. But it just worked for me. I'm only interested in competitive, not only interested, but mainly interested in competitive judo, always have been. And then our club's been the same. It's been the same in the 50, 51, 52 years I've been there. And so these were the clubs that were similar, where they wanted to fight. And it always started off, and always at the end of the club, of course, at the end of the session, when you went by yourself as a downgrade to a club, at the end of the night, you had to do a line-up. It was compulsory. At every club that you went to, you had to do a line-up. That's everybody who owned them at that night, from yellow belts to downgrades. You were expected to win. You were really expected to win the vast majority of the matches anyway. And that was sort of at the end of every session. It was just a line-up. In fact, we did it in his own club. We did line-ups in his own club. So we had to go out there at the end of the session and take a line-up just to get used to it. It made you mentally strong because you knew that would happen every single time you went. It's like going to a competition. It's not something that you can make up or pretend to do. It only works when it actually happens, when you're there, stood by yourself in the middle, and you've got 6 or 7 people who will come and try and throw you. And probably the last one will be the best one. So, as I said, there was spells. And also, I would say that the mats weren't of good quality. You think any places where they did judo were some strange places, in cellars and back of garages and just odd places. They just got buildings they could get. And there'd be no showers, no toilets in all of them, and definitely no showers. And you'd all be changing in the dojo, if we could call it that, the room that you're in. No changing rooms in most of them, not saying a few of the London clubs. They have facilities because of the Buddha Choir, which was the first club in Europe to open. But most of the people who went to them sort of clubs weren't that competitive anyway. They were just going there for the sporting side of it, really. And just do something physical.
And what would you say would be the biggest differences now then in the way maybe competitions or trainings performed, even at that higher level, compared to, say, when you were competing as an athlete?
At the higher level, vastly different. In Great Britain, I don't like working in other countries, but in Great Britain, you more or less, to get selected for a competition, right throughout the 60s, probably the 70s, you more or less have to be in London. You have to be down in London clubs, in Buddha Choir, Wrenchedon, things like that. Otherwise, you just didn't get selected. In fact, you didn't even hear about selections. Of course, there's no internet, no mobile phones, so you'd only ever hear anything about word of mouth usually. And so somebody hear that the team had been picked to fight, that somebody's coming from Germany or Austria or France or Scandinavia, they were quite strong in coming to England and going to other countries, and they had quite good heavyweights for some reason. So maybe they weren't world's strongest man, don't they now? But they always had really good heavyweights in Scandinavia, and they were popular countries. They went to Scotland quite a lot. And we also, I'd say, it was a very close shop in a way. Yeah, a very close shop was the international scene. In fact, one of my coaches, Tony Macconnell, he wanted to go down to a trials for the Olympic Games, and he had to finish work early. He got on a scooter, no motorways then, and drove to London on his scooter overnight to fight in the trials, which were held in a judo club at the Buddha Choir. He won the trials, come back up on his scooter to go to work the next day, and still get selected. They still get selected. They selected somebody from the Buddha Choir over him. So the system was pretty much rigged. And whereas now, it's so complicated to get selected. You have to be a professor to understand the qualifications. In our country, it's like must be 6 pages long, the things you have to do and go to, and I don't know, the behaviour patterns, and it's just incredible, really. They don't pick the best fighter; they pick the best person who fits their idea of a model judo player, which is there's no such thing as a model judo player. The best people in the world don't follow patterns; they make their own patterns. They make their own way. You'll see, like Neil Adams, for example, he had such a fantastic Juji Gitama, and suddenly Juji Gitama ring for years. That was the thing to do. And then Neil Exley won a bronze medal at the Olympics, and suddenly it resolved that. Neil Exley's old man was suddenly in fashion for years, and still is actually, as is Adams as well. So there are various things like that, various players come along with a particular throw, and suddenly that's the thing to be doing, instead of just really, you want to be the person that's developing them throws, not the one that's following them throws. You want to be developing some throws of your own. I think that's really what should be happening and what did happen in the past. And now we have to follow patterns. We have a pathway. Everybody has a pathway nowadays. So it starts off as a kid doing these things that somebody who's writing these in sat down in an office in London or wherever the National Centre is, Zim also, writing a pattern out, and they put all these fantastic slogans up, and this is the way forward, and this is the pathway to get to Olympic medal, etc., etc. Without very much consideration about the actual person's coach. It's all about the national system and how that works. And they go it completely the wrong way around. Completely the wrong way around, in my opinion. It should start with a coach, not just be a sort of extra part that sticks stuck at the end of it, that occasionally you might get a telephone call to say what's happening and what your players do when they go to these training camps or go abroad, and you never see a video, you don't get reports about them or anything, really. It's sort of like, like 2 different worlds completely now. You also, the national training centres that's sprung up where you have to go to, right from being a young boy, school really, or sort of finishing, when you finish college. A lot of them don't go to, very few go to university now, they have to go to a centre. And they're the full-time centre, which is funded only for players that's there. If you don't go there, you have no funding at all in this country. You have to go to a full-time centre. I don't know if that applies in other countries or not. And that's probably the biggest difference between then and now, is that you're taken away from the coach who's actually got you to the place in the first place, and have very, very little contact with him or input from them. From then on, it's sent down to national coaches who are normally appointed because they've done pretty well at judo, or been in the right place at the right time, or they fit the criteria, this long criteria for everything that the national organisation seems to have nowadays. And so the people who've actually got them there very, very rarely even get through the door to see them, to help them, to watch them. It's sort of a closed shop from there on. That did that years ago. They picked the people who won the trials. That's what the trials were for. That's why they're called trials. You win trials, you went to European Championships. That rate. If you want European Championships, you go to World Championships. Or if you did well in European Championships, you go to World Championships. That was a pathway. It was a pathway of success. Not of filling the right forms in, or being fitting the right criteria, being right, looking right weight or right size or fittest, or passing all these psychological tests that they have now. It was the people who won, as it is in Japan, as it is in France and Germany. If you win, you go. We don't get opportunity in this country. Unless you go to a national training centre, you don't go. It's as simple as that, really, which is quite worrying for our country. A lot of talent's just not going now. They don't see a future in training as hard as you have to train to get to the Olympics or the World Championships, or even the Europeans now. The Europeans are hard matches, very hard. Just to win a match there's hard with all these ex-Eastern Bloc countries. That's a huge difference as well between judo, isn't it? There's only one Russia in every match, or one Russian there. Now you've got like 10 different countries, all with really good judo players. They've good history of wrestling or similar sambo, etc. They all have a good background of fighting sports to back their players up. That's traditional in their countries. And now there's lots of them. Whereas years ago, there was one Russian, one German. So it's a lot harder to get there now than it were years ago. Even if you have talent, it's not the be-all and end-all, not in the National Association's eyes.
Earlier on, you mentioned there was a mental toughness in the training. And I was just wondering, how important do you think that is for an athlete?
Well, I would think for any athlete, not just a judo player, I would think that mental toughness is absolutely necessary. Without it, you're not going to get to the top. And I'm in this conversation now, if you don't put some sort of context to it, judo's a sport for everybody. It's not just for competitors. We're just talking about competitors now and people who want to get that. Let's say the Olympic Games, for example, the World Championships. But, I mean, it's a really great sport for everybody. It's physical. It's you don't have to be the strongest person in the world. You don't have to be fastest. You don't have to be big as small as whatever. It fits all. It's a one-fits-all sport. There's no doubt about that. So I'm not going to knock I'm not trying to sort of knock anybody who doesn't compete. There's a place for everybody here. But we're just talking about competition, competitive people now. So it's a quite narrow margin to talk about, really. And that's what you generally find in all sports, every sport, even in darts, even. I don't know, that's classed as a sport nowadays, or snooker, but it is. They still have to have a mental toughness about them. Everybody has. Because when you're competing, and there's only you walking out on that mat, no matter what sort of training you've had or whoever's there with you, there's only you stood in the middle of that mat at the end of the day, like a boxer, just like a boxer. There's only him stood in the ring at the end of the day. It's one man to one man, or one woman to one woman. It's the same at judo. And unless you have that mental toughness where you can forget the crowd, you can forget all the pressure that's put on you because of what you've gone through to get there, and how much people have spent, and how much you've spent, and how you spent your life and doing it, and give up all the things that normal people do to train. All that has to be forgotten. You just have to be able to focus completely and absolutely on that match, because in that 3, 4, 5 minutes that you've got, you can't afford to lose concentration for 1 second. Because if you do, that's the second you get thrown, and that's the end of it. Like it is with a boxer. Loses concentration for 1 second, bang, he's unconscious. Judo, bang, you're on your back, and that's the end of it. No matter how much you train. So you have to concentrate. That's the absolute main focus, is that 1 5-minute section of your life. That's all you have to think about. And it's not so easy to do with all the pressure that's a week today. Where everybody, the size of the teams that go out there, the doctors and the physios and the psychologists and what they call them, the get well people, look after your mental welfare, etc., etc. Like as all you have to have somebody with you holding your hand all the time. So if you hear all that and just get on with it, then that's not so common in people. It's not such an easy thing to do, which is normally why world champions, Olympic champions are special people. They have something about them. They just have an aura about them that they're self-confident in themselves. So I think the mental toughness side of it's important. And I would also say that, going back to the question you asked earlier about what we're like when we started, the vast majority of people that did judo then, what we call working class. I don't really like that word, working class. Everybody who works is a working class person. But they were usually manual workers. That'd be a better description. Manual workers. There were nobody in offices. You didn't get many office people fighting in judo. They were normally people who come from factories, or like I did down coal mine, or builders. A lot of people who worked in docks, who were quite a lot of people in docks in Liverpool and places like that who went there. So they were very physical in the jobs as well. So they were naturally strong, like farmers are. You get a farmer anywhere in the world, a special breed, aren't they? They have big hands. Big hands. Every farmer in the world has giant hands. They must have a place where they produce them, and they're all enormously strong. It's because of the physical labour that they do from birth. So nowadays, of course, it's got to be done at gym because there's not that much physical work about now. And a lot of people, as I said, don't even go to work. They go straight from school, straight into judo immediately. They don't have any physical work in their life. So they're going to be competing against people who come from, going back to ex-Eastern Bloc countries like Georgia, people like that, Mongolia. They're just tough people. They're still brought up as tough people. It's in the heritage. And we've lost that in our country, I think, probably in Australia as well, and quite a few European countries, but not in the Eastern Bloc and countries. They still have it. They still have that same mentality. They still have that same physical strength, which is just, I don't know. I don't know how you compete against that, really. Well, you compete against it might be better than them, obviously stronger or quicker or fitter. There's lots of ways to win at judo, isn't there? And I think that all them qualities, you need them all. You need to be quick, you need to be strong, you need to be able to think quick, really. You need to be alert to what's happening around you every single second. And sometimes the soft countries, they lose that. They lose it in the way the country is developed, the way the nation is, the way the work is, the way the attitude of the governments are when they're forcing you to all the woke people that's knocking about now. I think it's going to gradually make our countries softer and softer. That's what I say.
Do you think that mental toughness can be trained into someone, just like the other skills you mentioned, like speed and, obviously like technical proficiency in the sport? Do you think mental toughness can be a skill that can be taught or learnt?
I don't think it can be taught. I think it can be learnt, maybe. It can be, well, no, I'll tell you what, I think, thinking about it, I think it could be brought out to someone who has it but doesn't know they have it because they've never been put in a situation where they need to use it. As I say, because life is pretty soft in a way. Most kids sat down on bloody gaming machines, etc., all day and on the phones. They're not tested for mental toughness anymore. In fact, it's a sign that they don't want in schools anymore. They don't want mental toughness. They want everyone to be sane, like a production line, just do as they're told. And mental toughness, so I think to get mental toughness, you have to face tough situations. Otherwise, you don't even know if you have it. And you have to face them regular. Hence, when took away out in the environment as a young person to go to a national centre, not just in this country, in other countries as well, and in other sports, if they get took away from the environment they're brought up in, and if they're brought up in with a tough environment that's made tough for them by the coach and by the parents, they just don't get everything they want and they have to fight for things in their life, not for food, etc., but to get where they want to go if they have ambition in sport, then you can fetch it out of them and you can see it in people. And I would say that I saw it in you, for example, and we've discussed this before. When you first started, you didn't appear to have that sort of mental toughness, which I put down to the club you went to, which was a soft club, if you will. It wasn't a competitive place, but you wouldn't know that because you haven't seen anything else. And when you started coming to our club, which I've always considered a tough environment, then suddenly you blossomed. Bit of a late blossomer, but you blossomed, and suddenly there you were, one of the toughest guys in sport then in our country, and it still shows today. So I'm only using you as an example because it's a good example, really, of people who know you, that they want to recognise you as a 13, 14-year-old, you're like a different person, and that completely different to where you are now. So I've used that as an example. So it is there. There's lots of people who have it, but they don't know they have it because they're not tested to that degree. So again, going back, you have to have the right environment from the start. You have to have the right coach who's going to spot that and say, this boy's got some possibilities here. He can be better than he is, better than he thinks he is. But you have to put that toughness in his way. You have to put obstacles in his way that he has to fight through. That's a long, long process. It's not a 5-minute job. It's a long process. It's years of it. And then suddenly, there you are, the man. They've got it. As I say, you don't know that until you actually test them. You have to be tested early on in the life with somebody who's looking for it and see it and knows what to do about it and won't be soft with him. And this might come across as really like, oh, I'm really tough, etc. It's not about that really. Mental toughness is not about being tough physically. It's about being able to handle situations where you put under pressure and can handle it and can think clearly and take it for what it is. And then once it's done, you can just put that to one side out of your life, and that just comes in when you need it. You don't have to be that way throughout your life or throughout your family or anything. It's just in that specific environment that you need to be able to focus on it, really, as most athletes do. And when they're not doing that, you should really be able to relax in them, not be the tough guy and the tough person, the tough girl. Tough's not a right good word, is it, really? It's just, I'd say competitive, mate. Probably tough, I think.
I suppose from my point of view, when I've looked back over when I first started, like you say, at Bacup, and I was quite an emotional child. I didn't really know how to control those emotions, and it would be overwhelming. And when I was met with a situation where I felt overwhelmed, I'd inevitably cry, and I think that's sort of associated with being a bit soft. And then I think for me, I feel as though you give me the tools to manage those emotions, so not to like not to remove them or, to sort of ignore them or anything like that. But in a way, like you say, by exposing me to the situations in training, and whether it's on the judo mat or like the physical outdoor activities we used to do, sort of give me the tools to be able to manage those emotions and sort of channel them in a more productive way, rather than being in a sort of an overwhelming and destructive kind of way. And I think that's how I feel, as though what you say, that mental toughness, it's more just a better understanding of how to apply that energy.
Yeah, I would say, you've got several descriptions, really. We're talking about one word, but one word doesn't sort of encompass everything, does it? That mental toughness could be lots of different things, could be described lots of ways. And like you mentioned there, crying, etc. Well, I cry a lot. Still cry on television sometimes, you know what I mean? Crying's not a soft thing. It's not, don't make anybody soft as they cry. But that's just emotion. Everybody has emotions, don't they? So it's nothing wrong with showing that emotion to the world, really. That's nothing. It's a good thing. It's a good thing to have emotions. It might have to be difficult without them, really. It won't be very interesting. So, as you say, it's like how to direct them, how to control them. It's a long job. I think that you have to, again, it's back to the person who you're dealing with, who has to provide the opportunities to let you see that. Now, you mentioned there the outdoor training, for example. I think it's a really good example, and I'm big on this, as you know. That when you're doing something, we'll just go back to judo, really. When you're doing something like judo, as it's so physical, there's so many aspects to it, to a fight. It's not just a straight, simple thing. It's a constantly evolving thing. There's a fight. Then I think you have to do something other than judo to help to strengthen that resolve, which is, for me, outdoor training. Let's just say, you could just say SAS type of things, if you're going to the extreme. But that, as you know, that's what we did. We went to the extreme many times, some of the stuff we did. And that's, just to describe that for a second for the people who are listening. I mean, we did outdoor camps. And when I started doing very interesting coaching, and I started as the Northwest Area team manager for boys under 18s. I had a friend, Tony Macconnell, who lived in the Lake District, who was a ex-British coach, probably the British coach at the time, and probably, in my opinion, one of the best coaches I've ever come across in the world, by far. And that's a pretty popular opinion in people who know Tony. I was very lucky meeting him. And he said to me, why don't you bring the team, we're coming for the national team championships, why don't you bring the team up to Kendal, can stop in a youth hostel, and we'll do a bit of outdoor work with them, which I'd never done. Never even thought about it. So I took the Northwest Area team that was going to go to the national championships. I'd selected. We went up to Kendal for training weekend. Absolutely blew me away. Absolutely blew me away. Running up in the fells, climbing, jumping into lakes, freezing cold, doing what we call Barney Rubble circuits with rocks, just using rocks as circuit training. Just lots of unusual things, carrying logs, pulling tyres tied to your back, all things that are done now, but I've never seen before. And that was just the norm for Tony. That's how he trained. So that, again, massive changing point in my life. And I think in everybody's life that I've sort of coached since, because I've done it, I've always carried on doing that. In fact, I'm doing it tomorrow night with kids on mat. We're doing a little session on the judo mat from children from 5 to 15. With the same thing. I've got some logs and some pieces of carpet with tied on for making something we can pull on like sledges. Lots of things, pots of water, plastic bottles full of water that they can use as weights because it's more difficult to use instead of a weight. It's because it flops about. Just things like that. I think it's really important for judo players to do stuff like that, as I know that you've done it for years. And yourself and Michael Hawley and Danny Harper, they're all doing that sort of stuff now. So it's quite common now in the Northwest area. A lot of the people, let's say the Southern Softies, which they are, they look down on this sort of thing. Oh, what's going to go up there running in hills, and what's the point of jumping into waterfalls and carrying logs and lifting rocks, etc. They thought that's because they were lazy. They didn't like doing it. They didn't like getting their hands dirty. Whereas the people who were doing it loved it, or they perhaps didn't love it, but they felt better after they'd done it. And it made them tougher, going back to this toughness, it made them tougher then, mentally tougher, miles more. You could see it. Some people will jump off into a lake off a rock at first, but then once they do it a few times, no problem. They just overcoming the fears. And it makes you realise you can do stuff that you didn't think you could do. So I think that outdoor training is really important in judo training, and doing something that's just a little bit off the wall. It's not off the wall as I see it, it's off the wall as other people see it. And you can think of it yourself as you're running along. We did that thing, like the sheepdog trial, for example, where you got the tennis balls, if you remember that. You got the tennis balls, wrote the names on it. You didn't expect that type of thing. And then you're just running along, and suddenly you stop the group, and you throw these tennis balls into a field with all the names on, and they have to go and find their own ball to smack. Within minutes, they develop their own way of doing it. So when they find somebody else's ball, they'll throw it farther out field, kicking it away, and stamping it into the ground. Within seconds, that competitive element come out. And your brother smash you into the fence when running back because you were just beating him, just to get past you, and nearly broke your neck. So that sort of thing is important. That team, when we come back just from doing that simple exercise, that's all people, that's what he talked about, and still talk about it. They're the things that you remember, stuff like that, the hard times, and when somebody fell and hurt themselves, and just like they got up and carried on, blue blood coming out their head perhaps, or something like that. It won't be allowed to happen. It won't be allowed to happen in an environment, a national squad training environment. That would not be allowed to happen, that sort of training. But I bet they do it in Mongolia. I bet the Slovenians are doing it. Well, all the Slovenians are doing it. And the Syrians are. But it's just other countries look at it, view it a different way than we do. They'll find something that's hard to do. We seem to avoid stuff that's hard to do and just go for the judo, just completely go for the judo, and don't think of any other alternative training methods. They look down on because they're not traditional. I don't know if I've got off a tangent here, actually. I've no idea where I'm.
What you said there, so I mean, I'd be lying if I said I enjoyed every minute of it. There's definitely times where I loved the outdoor stuff, but there were times where I was
hang on a minute. Stop after. It'll take a minute to take this in. Oh, God.
But I mean, I still talk to, you say, Michael then, and, I talk to Danny Harper, we still keep in touch even on the other ends of the world. And every conversation we have, we inevitably talk about one of those outdoor activities, where it was like running through the river in Kendal in the snow, or, like you say, doing the Barney Rubble or running with the logs. And inevitably we'll always speak about one of those stories and, with fondness and, laugh about it. So definitely look back on it with fond memories. And, and like you say, try and pass the same thing on to our students now.
Well, that's the idea, isn't it? To pass it on. But sorry, go on, carry on now.
No, I was going to, because you mentioned obviously being Northwest squad coach, and then you were the Great Britain squad cadet coach for 15 years. Just want to ask you about that. And, were there any players during that time that really stood out?
Yeah, there were actually. I mean, Craig Fallon was one, I think, probably the most famous. Craig Fallon, well, now he's a 14-year-old boy, very shy and nervous, talented, so talented. I went on to win World Championships in Cairo. Michael Neal, nobody would know, not people who listen to people would know Michael Neal, but I think for me, probably one of the most talented players, certainly the top three that I've ever seen in my life. Badrick as well, Badrick from London Judo Club. He was another one, just an absolute natural. And look how they slipped out of the system. Going back to this system thing, they just wasted talents. They were just fabulous judo people. They could have been world champions if we had maybe a different system, I think, for a start, or maybe more money in the system, I think, probably as well. Could be 1,000 reasons, actually. I can think of loads of reasons why some of the really talented players didn't get there. But certainly the system, as it was and is, certainly it sort of put people off. The fact that they had to leave their own coaches and go with somebody else they didn't particularly like, or they didn't know, or they didn't think were a good coach, and put them in an environment they didn't want to be in. And so, consequently, they didn't even get on bottom ladder, going anywhere, again on a trip, getting selected. But going back to that squad, just some background information on that. There wasn't any, when I was the Northwest Area Squad Manager, there wasn't a follow-on from that. They started, the British team started at juniors, under 21s. There were nobody at 13, 14, 15, and teenagers. There were no national squad for them at all. And we had a boy at our club called Jeffrey Rushton, who won the Nationals. I was really disappointed with it. I think it was the first player for us to win Nationals. Disappointed that there were nowhere for him to go, no international competition or anything like that. Where there were international competitions being held, but Britain didn't have a team to take anybody. So I pestered the current England team manager at the time, as did Tony Macconnell, my friend. We pestered him about doing something about it. And he agreed to do a trial run, and they were called the Espoir Squad, which is what the French name for juniors. And they used to have one of those in the 60s that Tony Macconnell ran. And then they scrapped it when he finished as squad manager. Again, like a foresight completely. Why would you scrap a system that brings boys up from 60, 15-year-old into the national squads? Why would you scrap that system? It just shows how short-sighted we were. So he did a trial run with myself and Neil Adams as joint managers. I don't know how that worked with a joint manager, coach, etc. The first place we went to was France. I went to France, yeah. Went to France, a team in France. We won that tournament. In that tournament was Graham Randall was in that there. They were world champion. And well, there were several now, not so good on names anymore. But there were some really good players who had come out as good coaches in that very first team that we took out. Where would that be, David? Let me have a look. I can't even remember when we started it.
Is it 1989? I've got written down here on my notes.
89. Yeah. Yeah. But I know it's not as good as yours. Yeah, 89, yeah, you're right. So from that success, luckily we had that success in that first tournament we went to, then it became a regular thing then, so they made it part of the pathway, which is still there now. I thought at the time it was a bit, I would say, a BJ's point of view, British Judo Association, it were a little bit unprofessional from their point of view, because they just left myself and Alan Shathix, Trevor Sidlington, and a team of coaches that we got round us to run it really. And we more or less run it ourselves. It was a good thing for us, but well, in fact, it was a fantastic thing for us because we got to use our own ideas, hence using the outdoor sessions, etc., etc. And we started it right away immediately. We had Neil Adams Weirs as well, who were fantastic. I mean, you couldn't get a better person to be leading it. So we started doing training sessions once a month at Neil's club, and then we moved to Birmingham. We had them centralised. At that particular time, it was Great Britain. Now it's separate. It's England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales. All have their own squads and their own systems, and they go to their own competitions, etc. It's done completely different now. But then it was everybody. And we got over 100 players come to every monthly session. They flew down from Scotland, some of them come from Ireland, from Wales. They were fantastic. It was the best time that Britain's ever had for that age group, for under 18 age group. It was the best time they've ever had. We won European medals. We won medals at the Youth Olympics, the European Championships, the World European Youth. Just had a fantastic time. And that's slightly changed now because, as I say, they split up the system. And each country goes back on their own now. And by doing that, they've obviously weakened the system for everybody. So now they don't have the same amount of players training, and they don't have the same randori. They all have different ideas of what to do. And a country as small as we are, it just baffles me. Absolutely baffles me. Probably the worst thing that's ever happened to British Judo, splitting the sport up like that. We still have an England team, we still have a British squad, but they don't meet as much. They don't have the same effort because they've all got their own coaches now in their own countries with their own squads. So we don't have that cohesion that we had before. And I don't think we're ever going to get it now. We're too small. We're too small with too many various different ideas of the way forward. But going back to them years, we had a fantastic time. And I got a lot of success. We went on maybe 6 international trips every year, bus trips, which we organised ourselves, going to different countries in Europe. Very, very successful. In fact, the trips were the backbone of the squad. That's what people wanted to do. And going back to you saying about the things you talked about when you talk about your times with Danny and Michael, that when I talk to players that were competing then for Great Britain, they talk about the bus trips. What happened on bus and what happened in hotels and how they used to sneak out, etc., etc. And, they don't talk about the judo. They talk about the experience of being there, not of the results that they had or didn't have, but the actual experience of being with other people, like-minded people, being away from home for the first time without the parents, etc. It's like a different world that they introduced to, and that made them better individuals in the long run, made them more independent-minded. Again, they learned things that they think they couldn't do. They got used to finding their own way on buses, planes, etc. to get to the airport, and sometimes you'd meet them in another country, and they made their own way there. So all them sort of things, when you're lost, for example, as well, you're lost together. You work by yourself, you're in a team, and creating that team ethos is absolutely crucial, as I'm sure you know, I'm sure everybody knows. If you don't have a team ethos, like it is in football, for example, it's evident that you can have the best players in the world, but if you don't play together, you still lose. You know what I mean? They end up starting arguing amongst each other, etc. I think that was in lots of sports, team sports. And judo's an individual sport, but it's also a team sport. And the team part of it's sometimes lost. They concentrate on the individual quite a lot and not the team effort. You can't be a champion without a team around you of other players that you train with. It's just impossible. You've got to have the randori. You just can't do it without it. And so hence when we split our country up into four sections, then we lose all the randori players. So it's like you have say 5 or 6 people fighting each other all the time and meeting maybe once every few months to do a bit of randori with somebody else. And some of the sessions, they spend more time on technique than they do on the randori. And the randori is the most important part you can do when you're in a group. Without a shower, now you go to Japan. I've been to Japan loads of times. I don't think I've ever seen them do a technique session unless it was one that was planned in another room. But on the main mat, you just get on there, warm up, and away they go. It's randori. Their technique's done when they're kids and they're growing up. They do it at school and at universities, at colleges. That's where their technique's delivered. And they expect them to be able to do all that sort of stuff when they get to big universities or get to the national training centres. So they just do randori. And it works. Look how it works for them. And that applies in lots of countries. Don't apply in our country. It's the opposite way around. No more time on technique and less time on randori for some reason. With coaches, they don't know. Is there anything else you want to talk about on the national squads, it were?
So you mentioned Tony Macconnell a few times earlier on in the conversation, and I was just curious as to what the extent his influence has had on your coaching.
Well, probably not just influencing the coaching, probably influenced my whole of my life, actually, as it has done with many, many people. I would think he'd be one of the, not today, obviously, he'd be because he died last year, and 80, probably 81, 82 now. So, but if you could ask coaches around the world what they thought of him, I don't think we'd find a single one that didn't hold him in high esteem. When I first met him, well, I'll start to say some of the people's influences that's current today in the coaching, like Billy Cusack and Mark Earl, Luke Preston, who still producing Olympic players, world players. And there's lots of other people as well that sort of on the periphery of that. They've had contact with him over the years, and they've been impressed with the way that, not just the coaches, but the way that he carries himself. He has a presence about him that inspires you. It inspires players, it inspires coaches. He's a strong man, a strong character. I could probably talk about him for hours, not talk about him, but the things that is imparted on other people and myself and other people that's been in contact with him through judo. He helped me we started in maybe 1980 when I first started with the North West Area Boys Squad. He was the North West Area men's manager at the time. He'd just come from being the manager of Sweden, which he transformed the whole country there from a non-judo country into winning medals. So I got the job in 1980, and Tony said to me, why don't I take him up to Kendal, the team, instead of training them as was normal at judo courses on the weekend. So I went for a weekend up there. And just the way that we did things we'd never done before, just examples were like sort of fell running, the fells. And the reason for doing stuff like that, there's a reasoning behind everything he did. It's for balance, isn't it? And you're constantly looking, without realising it, but you're constantly looking where you're putting your feet. So that in running, you have to think about that type of running as opposed to running around the track, where you can just put the lap after lap after lap. You can think about anything. But when you're running on rough ground, you have to concentrate all the time you're doing it, and it could be for maybe a couple of hours. And so then we did that jumping in lakes, carrying logs, pulling tyres, climbing, rock climbing, all real, what they would call character building stuff. And people sometimes mock that, but you see that it does work that way, doesn't it? If you look at like the SAS in all the countries, the different SAS type of groups, and Marines and Commandos and SEALs in America, they're still doing that sort of training. They're still doing it. And it's becoming quite popular now with personal trainers, etc. Nobody did it them days. Nobody. It was unheard of. But he did it. And it transformed your way of thinking. Let's not think just about doing technique or doing certain things in the gym. Let's think about getting them outside into a different environment type of thing. And it builds up a terrific team spirit. And it's a team spirit that we're good at doing. Without a team ethos, it's really difficult to progress. And you've got to build a team slowly. You can't just go to meet a team of people. If you're a team manager and these lads turn up on a weekend and you don't know them, it's very difficult to make that into a team. So you've got to do these sorts of activities where they're out of the comfort zone and they all have to work together. They won't be the best thrower. They won't be the best neo-laser man. They won't be the best runner. Somebody will be able to beat them at something. So it draws you all together a lot easier than just going on judo mat and the same person throwing everybody, which to me seems a bit pointless. It doesn't help the person who's throwing them, it doesn't help the people who are being thrown. So to throw something else of a training, something in a training mix where they can't do that and you can beat them, it equalises things out. So everybody gets a bite of the cherry. Now you've got to earn respect as well. And the things he used to do were, he used to impress on me, always be first to do it. So if you're out on a run, for example, and you're going past a river or a lake and something, you be the one to jump in first. Don't even tell him. In fact, he never used to tell us anything. And I've picked that up off him. I don't tell people what they're going to do. I don't do programs. I don't really see a point in giving somebody a program for a weekend training session so they know everything that's going to happen in front of them. And then you can see him talking and saying, I don't like doing this. Oh, God, we're doing that again. We're doing this again. Don't tell them what's happening. Just spring it on them as a surprise. Nobody's going to tell you the match what's going to happen to you. Nobody's going to come out and say, I want to throw you, each your match, I want to throw you, whatever. You've got to be ready to take things on the run. So I've always adopted that attitude myself, that I don't tell people much what I'm doing. Sometimes not even the coaches I'm working with. I want it to come as a surprise and see how they react to each situation that you put them into. And then you've got to be sort of look like you're invincible to them, really, if you can, especially with young people. You've got to do what you say, what you're asking them to do. You have to do it first. And if you can't do it first, you have to have somebody there who can, another coach who can do it first. And then they do it right away. Looking at something is far better than talking about something. It's far better than looking on a video. If you can see somebody do it live, do it well. So he was good at picking people out and doing that, using the right people, and building a team up in a judo sense now. And I would imagine it works in any sport actually, but in a judo sense, we're picking the right people to come as your support coaches. Now every team seems to have loads of people there which don't actually know anything about judo, like for well-being and nutrition and physiotherapists and people like that. We've got with a massive team away with you. But for judo, when you're training on a weekend, you need people there who know about judo. This is my view, of course, and it was Tony's view. You never had a physiotherapist, ever, never. And I never brought a physiotherapist in when I was team manager, even with the GB team. Because as soon as a physio appears, everybody knows that's it. They'll have a queue, like it's a sale at Asda. There'll just be loads of people immediately, as soon as they see them wanting taping up and a bad back and a bad neck. So don't give them the opportunity. If they're injured, they should be there. That was his opinion. That's my opinion. If you're injured, don't go. It's pointless. Because you're just spoiling it for somebody else. So when you start looking at it from that point of view, it makes it easier to pull a team together. You want like-minded people who just want to get on with encouraging people to work hard. Because if you don't work hard, you don't get anywhere. It's a fact in life. You have to learn to work. And the way that people are educated today, I'm saying the way, it's probably not the right way of saying that, but the length of time that they're in education now, they're coming out of education in the 20s. So they haven't really had any hard life. They've just done education, really, and judo on the sideline. So consequently, they don't really know a lot about hard work. Whereas in lots of other countries, they start that as young people. They have a harder regime than we do in, I would say, softer European countries. And Tony recognised that right away. He made everything that he did look physically hard and mentally hard. And I've tried to do exactly the same thing. An example would be the climbing up. We started doing in the 80s, early 80s, we started going in winter times between Christmas and New Year. We went to a climbing up in the Lake District, at the bottom of Fallon, which is the highest mountain in England. And we travel up there and spend 3 days there, as I say, between Christmas and New Year, which is normally a holiday for most people. But this was, them days, the trials were in January. So this was preparation for the trial in January, when other people would be on holiday. And that was the key to the whole thing, really, to make people do things when other people were not doing things, just to get that little bit extra out of them. So psychologically, we were better prepared. That was one of the psychological keys, if you will. You've done the more training than anybody else during this period. So that's the motivation right away. And so we started doing these camps. And you start off in the morning at 5 o'clock, out to bed, walk up out of Fallon, run back down again, just in training gear, no matter what the weather was like. It was a hard slog, maybe 2.5 hours. And you would be running down, and the walkers were coming up with all the gear on, the walking sticks and all the rest of the stuff we carry today. And we'd be running down in shorts and T-shirts, etc. And they'd be calling us, we'd be calling coaches' names for allowing the boys to do it. But that became the norm. It didn't become an epic. It just became the norm. Right? You went there, you knew you were going to be running up and down Helvellyn, maybe twice out in 3 days. That's just the start of your day. So that camp is still going today, over 40 odd years on, in a different format. But that winter camp is still called the winter camp, and it's still being run today in Kendal, where people come for a Christmas period and do 3 or 4 days training prior to the start of the New Year. So it shows how successful that were. And there's not many people not anybody that does that, apart from Tony and Kendal, that do them sort of camps in our country. And so overall, it's had a great influence on me. And I try to use my life in the same way, to be fair to people, be honest about things, and you want to be loyal. Loyalty means a lot. If you're loyal to the people who's around you, they'll be loyal to you. You know, no backstabbing and no. If you've got something to say it, and let's get out in the open and then get on with the job. And they have a great way of motivating people by using things like clubs. You know, our club's better than this club. When you go into it, you have a good talking now. You know, we have to go over there now, and as soon as we get through that door, we're going to smash them straight away. Suspected spam, get about 20 a day. And then if you want to example that, the England-Scotland thing, that role's a big deal. Still is a big deal, obviously. You know what I mean? So you use them sort of things as motivation when you're going up somewhere. Never been beat by Scotland, or Germany used to bomb my granddad's chip and going to the match in Germany, all that type of thing. It's used as a joke, but when you're in an intense atmosphere in back of a van travelling to a match, it does become a joke then. It becomes a motivational point, and it's just the way you put it over to them. I mean, these are just obviously small examples, because you travel together in a van. Going in a van's fantastic. Going on a bus is fantastic, which very few people do nowadays. They fly everywhere, and they'll meet in the country. They won't even meet at the same airport sometimes. You know, that's not a team. That's not the way to produce a team ethic. You've got to travel together. You've got to eat together. You've got to train together. You've got to warm up together. You know, it's like you're in your own little bubble, really, and that's what you want to be. You see, the tennis players today, they have a little team around them. Don't you? Think, well, the tennis player needs 6 people start watching it, but they've built that bubble around them. And Djokovic has a little team around him, and look at him, how focused he can be on what he does. So, I'll probably go out to my remit here, really. But that's the sort of influence he's had on me and on other coaches and on other people that he's met that still talk fondly about him, and the best times of their life when we were training up at Lake District, because he was taking them out of the comfort zones all the time, and he's giving them a reason, explaining why they were doing it. what benefits are out of it. It weren't just to be fitter. It was to be a better person at whatever you're going to do in life. And I think that there was another thing as well that were important that seems to be lost a little bit in today's society. The fact that we have certain rules that you have to follow. And when I was team manager, I got a lot of stick over stuff like this. When I took over the boys' team, I brought the rules in like we were like to wear baseball caps, for example, especially backwards. When they walk into the dojo, don't put around in the pockets at any point during the training methods. Otherwise, the consequences you have to the press ups and you have to be late on mat. If you're late on mat, you just send them off. That's it. Right, you miss this session, off you go. Unless you have an absolute cast iron excuse. Now today, they walk on mat when they walk off, they walk off. They tape up when they're on mat, they don't tape up. Even though it's written down for every training session. There's always somebody in this country and other countries that start taping up when you start letting Randori started. And that's because there's no consequences. If there were consequences, if they'd been sent off once or gone away and say, right, good afternoon session, you're missing this one, it won't happen again. It just won't happen again. But people say that's too harsh, you can't do that sort of thing now. You can't tell people what to do nowadays. That's rubbish. That's absolute. How are they going to learn? How are they going to learn to follow instructions? How are they going to hold a coach in an esteem if they don't take any notice of what he says? There's no point in being sat in a chair if the player doesn't respect you, just won't listen to you. He might as well not go anywhere. In fact, you might as well not go to competition with him if they don't listen to what you're going to say. So that has to be built up over a period. You can't just make somebody at airport you've never seen before sit in a chair and expect to coach him, which is what happens in a lot of places. It's impossible. In fact, it's ridiculous when you think about it. You've got to know somebody if you're going to coach them. You've got to know somebody if you're going to motivate them. They have to know you, and you have to know that you're telling them the truth, that what you think is that's what can happen. You've got to convince them of that, and you're not going to do that unless you've set up some sort of background with them, really. And having rules like that, I still see boys that I coached on the national squad 30 years ago, and I bump into them today, and I visibly see them get their hands out of the pockets when they see me coming towards them. So just do it. It's an automatic reaction. And if I said that, it sounds like I'm saying, they're frightened of something. It's not nothing to do with that. Absolutely not do it. It's the fact that we built a relationship up where if they follow the rules, I'd do anything for them, as a coach should do, really. If they played their part, I'd play my part. And that takes a long, long while to build up. And you have to be very, very honest with each other about it. You can't be halfway with it. You've got to be in or out. And I think that sort of thing is hard to do today, harder to do today because of the social rules that people sort of have in place nowadays and all the wokeness that's in the world. So young coaches today have got an harder time to build that type of thing up, I think, to build that sort of relationship up that I think that certainly our area with our boys and we have in GB for the squad that we had at the time. And that really comes down to Tony at the end of the day, for me. It comes down to his influence on me, the way that he run things. I try to copy it and then put my own twist to it. So there's lots of other things I could talk about Tony Fallon, but there's not really time for it, mate. I've just talked about something else. I know I'm going back to just what we talked about, actually. One of the things he did do, this is Tony again, sorry, again, learnt me a lesson, how to do things, is even though he was very, very good at what he did, he brought people in, experts in the field, like a running coach, for example. He wasn't a running coach, he was actually a feld runner that he brought up to the club on a regular basis for quite a while until they all got the idea of it. And they showed him how to do proper feld running. And then he brought a sprinter up who showed him how to do proper sprinting, just for a short period, maybe two or three sessions. So the boys suddenly went into being quite good sprinters, and they went into being really good fell runners. Took us to a boxing, to a British boxing coach. Just again, took everybody, including myself, because I had to get in as well about that tanking. We had to get in with boxers just to show a different side of your mental toughness and your physicalness. But the boxing coach there was really good, really good. It was very interesting. So he did things like that as well. Getting people in, and weight coaches, even though he'd done weights all his life, he still brought some people in just to show certain things, some little things that that we haven't thought about, or small points. Like you do when you're teaching judo, really. It's the small points that matter. It's the fine detail that matters, really. Everybody can do jiu-jitsu, but they don't always get to the match. But you ask me, I'll have them to do it. Pull the arm out. It makes you cry with pain. You have to know that to really do it properly. And I used to bring people in who could do things like that. And then they'd move on and he'd have that knowledge. And I'd have that knowledge. And the boys would have that knowledge. So it spread out like that. So it weren't just on his own all the time. He did use other people. He used other people quite a lot, actually, when I think about it. But they were always experts in the field. They weren't talkers, they were doers. They weren't actually national coaches or anything like that. They were just boys who'd done the sport for a long while and knew what they were doing. One of the things that impressed me with the way Tony worked was the first time I worked with him, it was just prior to the national team championships. It was the first one for me with the North West area team. And I've no experience of doing the national team championships at all. So, following the weeks in Kendal, the weekends in Kendal, he said to me, get the team kitted out with tracksuits, including the reserves, get the area to pay for them, so they feel like they're getting something out of this. So, the area agreed. We bought, I think, 11 in the team. We bought 22 tracksuits, plus 2 for the coaches. And we got good tracksuits. We didn't buy crappy ones. We got good tracksuits. And then he said the team event was being held in the North West area, which was our area, and it was being held in St Helens, which a lot of the team could actually live near or actually in St Helens. And he said, put them in an hotel for the night before, get them together, take them for a meal if you can have a meal. Then just take them out at night, then go to the hotel together, get the tracksuits on. Everybody walks into the place together and wait. Don't go early. Just come in, wait till a few teams are there, and then walk in together. Don't talk to anybody. Walk straight past them. Just go straight in, straight to changing rooms, get changed, onto the mat, warming up. Everybody, without talking to anybody. And that's a lot of parents. Lots of parents complaining, saying, "Why are you doing that? Everyone lives 2 minutes away from venue." I said, "I don't care. If you want to be a team, that's what they have to do. They have to come together. They have to travel together. They don't want any parents there. Just the coaches, the boys. Don't talk to them in the morning, etc., etc." And we did exactly what he said, and we won it. We won the national team championships for the very first time, and won it quite easily. The team we fought had 8. They were lending the team. They had 8 national gold medalists from 2 months before, and we beat them easily. And that, again, just opened my eyes to what the team ethos does. And I've continued that sort of thing ever since. And I could just take a step further. When Tony was the manager of Sweden, they had a team competition in the Northwest area, and he did exactly the same thing. The Swedish team come in, walked into the venue. They all had suits on, same suits, really smart looking lads, really smart suits, collar and tie on. Marched them into the venue, straight through, across the front of the hall, where all the spectators sat, to the changing room, changed, back on, doing the warm-up. The Northwest area team were defeated before they got on that. Everybody were looking at them, thinking, what's going on here? We've never seen anything like that before. So it was a measured response that we were doing to these things. He thought about it and thought, how can we impress before we even step on the mat? How do we impress and make people feel inferior? And that worked. It worked an absolute treat. And again, just going back to how he influenced me, I learned that lesson right away. And that's what we tried to do. In every session we went away with the British squad, put certain people in charge. A man called Ramsey, who was an ex-paratrooper, and 1 or 2 other people that had been in positions of authority, if you will, in the forces. And we would just walk the players in tracksuits, no messing about, no sitting about in stands, no walking about talking to people, straight in the venue, into the changing room, onto the mat, warm-ups, hard warm-ups, not messing about warm-ups, not some people standing about by themselves, but the whole team warmed up together. You could see the crowd were looking at them all the time, thinking, God, it looks impressive. And I used to sit back then and watch, and the crowd, just watching the reaction of players in the crowd, you could see them all looking at them and thinking, yeah, who's these fellas? That sort of thing makes a difference. That was a really big point that I learned off Tony. And as I say, I tried to continue that throughout my team managing career. I think it's a good thing to think about, is how you approach your entry into a tournament. You know, don't be casual about it. Have a plan. Have a plan and do it properly. You know, you've had your plan, you've had your plan getting up to it, doing all these training sessions. Have a plan, even getting to the venue and how they behave and where they go when they get in there. And when they do the warm-up, they've got the warm-ups planned, everything's planned. So that nobody has to worry, nobody has to think about what's going to happen on the mat. They just have to do what you tell them to do before they get on the mat. They should be able to do that themselves once they're on there. There we go.
I was just going to ask about where you're, so obviously you travelled a lot and you mentioned a lot of different places there. Where's been your favourite place to go, or maybe a favourite trip?
Not a difficult one. I'd have to split that into sections, really. The most interesting would be China. We went to China. I'll come to that in a second. The best place for judo would be Japan. The most surprising place was Azerbaijan, Baku, which is used quite regularly now in Europe as a sports centre for other sports as well. They obviously put all the money into it. When you think Azerbaijan, it's a backward country, that. Absolutely fabulous. The people were wonderful, absolutely. I was amazed, absolutely amazed. Went there for a youth Olympics. I weren't looking forward to the country at war at the time, still is at war, I think. But it's only a small country. And when we rung up the Home Office to see if it was a safe place to go, they said, it is. There's a war going on at the moment, but it's in the north. So you'd be okay going to Baku. So we sent a man over called Trevor Sedlington, one of the team members that we could afford to lose. And when he come back, he said the wall was only the size of Scotland. It was like being in Scotland from England with the wall, but they thought that was okay, it was safe to go there. And as it happened, it were, and it still is. It's just a fabulous place. Very, very traditional. People were really nice. Go back to China. China was amazing, just amazing. The culture there. You have to go to a country to understand what it's like. It's not like watching it on TV or reading about it or watching a documentary. You have to feel what it's like when you're in there. China is exactly what I expected it to be, really, in a way. That everybody follows instructions, as they do in Japan. Everybody follows instructions. They're frightened of the national, let's say, whoever's in charge of the country, the governing body. They all have back in the mind whatever they say and do when they're talking to, especially when they're talking to foreigners. You've got to have a translator with you all the time. It has to be with you wherever you go. This would be 25 years ago. We took 22 players, myself and Tony, and another coach. And they were a return trip. They'd been to training camp in Kendal in the Lake District with Tony. And they paid for everything. When we got to the country, they paid for everything, for the hotels. We had to pay for the flights only, all the food and everything else was provided by the Chinese, because we'd done that for them, their team in England, in the Lake District. So I took 22 players, young players, all under 20, all under 21, maybe under 23 anyway. Yeah, under 23. We took them. The bus put on for us, a coach put on for us for the whole trip. And then an interpreter with us, a driver who used to have to broke down with the bus all the time. But the engine were outside the driver, so it just used to lift the lid up, mess about inside, bang a bit, and then it seemed to go again. But the hotel were nice. They had a nice hotel for us, and the training facilities were fantastic, absolutely fantastic. They were a women's team that we were training with at first, their national team. And there was about 40 players, 40 women there, 40 girls, all selected from the various regions. They were all regional championships throughout China. And they go there, and that must be a fantastic life for them, because we've got like 2 in the room, they have televisions in the room, some that most of them have never seen. Not most of them, but certainly some of them. Good food, yeah, but the training was hard. The coaches they had were cruel. They were really cruel, I thought. I'll give you one instance. There's a girl called Sophie Cox, who was from our club. She was training with a girl who got a silver medal in Olympic Games or World Championships, I'm not sure which time. And they were doing a particular move that the girl was struggling with, actually, which surprised me. It was like a rolling junior guitar, something like that. And she was just like sort of struggling with it, and I was just explaining to her just a couple of small pieces she was missing. And the coach come along, her coach apparently, picked her head up, but pulled it and smacked her across the face. What's going on here? And after several discussions about it, with the other coaches who thought it was quite normal. But they had to leave. We said, we're going home if we didn't. Well, going back to the hotel, I'm not coming back in. If they weren't thrown out, which they were eventually, but of course it would have been right back in because they thought it was okay. And the coaching system there is strange. They have 2 coaches on the mat, and they have the personal coaches for some of the better stars, for the superstars. They have maybe half a dozen people with their personal coaches who can also come to the centre. But they don't go on the mat. They just sat there with the normal clothes on. They don't have a gi on, drinking tea and smoking aside at the mat, just watching. And that was their coaching system. But they had to do 4 sessions a day. And they didn't do any running, which was surprising because we took them out on that running track there outside. It was part of the university they were working in. And we took them on running track and they didn't do it before. They didn't do any running at all, which really surprised me. They just did judo. But they had, in the back of the judo hall, they had I would say, like a gym, if you will. But it was an unusual gym. They invented things for particular players, for particular throws. I'll just give you a couple of examples. We had one girl who did Marotti and Hog. The father, he was there, the dad was there with the engineer. And he made a contraption with 2 semicircular bars and springs at the bottom of it, and a car seat, a bench car seat out of a car on 2 wires with handles on. And she had to pull, so when it was at the bottom of the steel work, it was sat down on these springs. And she had to pull it up, and it come over in a curve, till it come to a curve and she was sat on it. So that was the perfect position for Marotti and Hog for her. So she used to pull it over. I'm using my hands here like I'm doing it. She'd pull it over for Marotti and Hog and just sit on the seat. It had to land, so she sat on the seat, so to squat down. It was a fantastic thing. And then she'd let go and it would go back and bounce on the springs, and she'd just repeatedly do that, for example. And he looked for different things for different players to help him with a particular technique. He had a big heavyweight there. She won World Championships. I think she was called Zoo. Well, certainly the husband was called Zoo. If it weren't her, then he was also a world champion. And she was like 6'7", giant artist, massive, huge hands, like a farmer. So for her, they got a bench, like a joiner's bench as we have them here, where you have a groove down the middle. And in between randori practices, because she were all to get randori practices for her, they had a big fat lad who just stood there waiting to be thrown by her. And that was his job. It probably about 160, 170 kilos. She just constantly threw, just lashed him up and down mat. And then in between the randoris, she went into the back room. She had a big dumbbell, big kettlebell. It must have weighed, 40 kilos, as if it were. She just pushed that up and down constantly with one hand down this groove on the bench. And then next time she went, she'd do her hand just for strength. It was just for her, only her did it. They had that sort of mentality where they just do what they were told and just do it repeatedly. They had to work really hard. There were no resting and no drinking water. It was just really hard sessions they were. But the place was fascinating. They took us to the Great Wall of China, which is, without a shadow of a doubt, the finest thing I've ever seen in my life. It sent a hair stand. I think when I saw it, the way, when you see it, I've seen pictures of it, of course, everybody's seen pictures of it, but to see it going up and down hills in a straight line with no deviation over some of them, just incredible, absolutely incredible. And it was perfect condition, absolutely perfect condition. It was fantastic. They really looked after us over there. They really looked after us. But I think the training were cruel. They were definitely cruel. And Sophie Cox met, of course, like the players always do, they always got to meet people. I don't know something else I can tell you. I'll forget it. Every night, these girls, they have a dance hall. They have their own dance hall, if you will. It was like a little theatre. And they played music in there. Karaoke, mad like jam song. They were doing singing, horrible, terrible singers, obviously, terrible singers. And they kept insisting that we did a part of the karaoke, but they had no records. So they said Tony Macconnell was a bad singer, actually played in a band at one time. So they said, we'll send out for the record. We'll go and get some music for you to do. I weren't looking forward to it because I'm a terrible singer. And they come that night, that we've got a record piece to sing for me and Tony to sing. As we were like lead coaches. And we got up to sing this song. And they come on. Danny Boy, the Irish song, obviously. I just thought more of an inappropriate song I've never heard in my life, really, to sing in China. To people who didn't understand what you were singing anyway. So we did that. And then when they finished, they come and give you a bunch of plastic flowers. So they give you a bunch of plastic flowers, you sit down in your chair, next thing that goes on. When they finish, they come and take the flowers off you and give it to them. It was just one bunch of flowers, they passed it around to everybody, and everybody claps you. Really strange. And all the girls that were there, all the girls who trained, who looked like ferocious animals during the day, they were all dressed in they all had like little skirts on and white gloves, little white delicate gloves women used to wear in England in 20s and 30s when they're having the tea, when they're having outside tea. It was really strange, really contradictory, like a contradictory experience. Kept getting surprised all the time with what they did. And they thought that were really nice. That's how people were in England when they were dancing. I got sidetracked then going back over that. I just remembered it. It was a funny experience. Anyway, so at the end of that, Soapy Cock saw some of these girls. They've become quite friendly with a few of them. I saw some at the University World University Championships. And she was talking to this girl and she met who had a bit of English. And she said they'd all gone. They didn't win anything at Worlds. And they'd gone, all of them. And 40 more girls the year after. She said they just get rid of them. That's how they did it. If you're not successful in the first year or two, you're gone. Everybody. And 40 more there. Now, they have a country that can do that, don't they? But they're not very successful, are they? China, you think, with the amount of people that, particularly girls, because girls tend to, in them sort of countries, it tends to be a way out of them, to get out the system, because they're tied in such a poor system for women. You'd think, well, they were very, very aggressive, they were very, very fierce and committed, but they didn't win anything, and they were gone. And that's probably because they were gone. They didn't keep anybody. So there's no continuation. There was no continuation there. And I thought, this is why China aren't doing very well at judo, really. And probably because you can't use the drugs like that you do in swimming. It was a contradictory country. I think they could be really good with the women. Not so sure about the men, but certainly with the women. And they don't have that success because they don't have that continuity. They just get rid of them too quick. And it's a long haul with judo, isn't it? It's a long haul. You have to start young. Mainly start young. Very few start in the 20s and do well, very, very few. So I think that system, that were an interesting country for that. And Japan's interesting. Obviously, Japan's fantastic, which is not so bad for Australians to go to. It's not that far, is it? But as you know, we've been there ourselves. I've been several times there. And the judo's just magnificent to watch. It's just everything's so easy. They make everything so easy looking when they're doing the uchimatas and all the really big throws. They just make it look so easy. And they obviously do it from being 4 or 5 years old. And the training pattern's different, isn't it? Because the randoris for them aren't like they are for us in Europe. They're not fights, they're randoris. Whereas we turn them into fights. They don't mind if they get thrown. They don't mind if they get thrown by somebody who's not as good, well, nowhere near as good as them. They just play the game. So consequently, they get lots of throwing done with each other. When we do randori, very few people get thrown because they don't want to be thrown. They don't want to be thrown. And it's not. We don't have the right attitude for it. I was bad when I'm doing it, or when I were doing it. I didn't like being thrown. It was always a fight. Whereas the Japanese have a different mentality. They let each other throw each other because they're looking at the gracefulness of it, and it's just part of the spirit that they have. And they're just fantastic judo players. I don't think anybody can catch them. You know. I can't see any country in the world dominating it like they do. Anywhere near dominating it like they do. That's me done on that subject, David.
Well,
there's actually too many stories to tell about different clubs. So it's bore your listeners to death.
Yeah, that was great.
I think I react better to questions rather than thinking about things to say, because I've been in judo a long time, as you know, and I've done a lot of teamwork, probably 30 years of working with teams, which I quite like. And, I treat a judo club like a team. Everything's a team to me, because without a team, you've got nothing. Individuals, you can't be. It's an individual sport. That was an individual sport, which needs a team effort. So you can't be one man that gets to World Championships or wherever by yourself. You have to have a lot of that randori partners, as everybody has to get something out of that session. So this is a little bit where we're lacking our country, that we don't have mass randori sessions. We don't have massive amounts of judoka that do randori nowadays. A lot of clubs aren't even. I mean, I think in our particular area, Northwest area, And we have 62 clubs, I think. And I probably out of that 62 clubs will have 6 clubs that actually compete, which is ridiculous, really. But it's a competitive sport in a way. Well, it is to me. It is to me. And I suspect that's the same all over the country. It's always the same. It's the same clubs that continually win medals at competitions, etc. And I know there's another side to judo. Obviously, there's a social side. You know, there's clubs that don't want to go to competitions. They don't want in the gradings. They just want to do judo, which is fine, absolutely fine. But that's not for me personally. I think you have to have what can I say, like a focus or what I want to produce winners. I want to produce winners. And even if they don't win, I want to produce people who want to be winners, who try to be winners, who want to get the very best out of themselves. And I think parents want that as well. Parents want to see somebody doing that with them. You know, instead of, as going back to the school, back to rules again, the schools and the limitations that they have in schools now and colleges is massive. So, you know, people can't say anything to anybody that might offend them. But when you're in the judo team, you can say things that offend them. You're not offending them. You're just telling them what's wrong. You're telling them what they're doing wrong. And how you should live your life right. And if you don't like it, you can say, well, off you go, don't come to the judo club anymore. It's simple, really. So you do end up with a like-minded group of people around you. So it makes your life more enjoyable. We only get one life here. We only serve once. And you might as well enjoy it. If you don't enjoy what you're doing, it's pretty pointless doing it. So you've got to do things that you think are going to make things better. And there's no point trying to say, well, I can't do that because I might offend him. He might be upset if I tell him that he's useless at doing jukitami or uchimata or whatever. Well, he's useless, so don't do it. Find something else you can do. Let's work on something else. And if you get upset about it, well, it's tough. So, yeah, okay. Again, I could talk about stuff like this all the time because it's so annoying in my eyes, but that's not going to change now. Society's changing. But it's not changing in some countries. It's not changing in Mongolia. It's not changing in Russia. It's not changing in Japan. It's not changing in a lot of countries, but mainly the softer ones, like we are. I don't know Australia's like, obviously, but certainly countries in Europe are going down that route. Apart from the ex-Russian, ex-East German countries, they seem to be sticking to it. They seem to be sticking to what they were doing before, which is why they're so hard to beat, why they're so strong and so strong mentally. I'm done with that one now, David.
No, spot on, Brian. No, I'll probably leave it there, Brian. No, really, really appreciate you coming on and sharing some of your knowledge and stories with us. Obviously, you've been my coach for like 24 years now, so I've experienced it firsthand. And you know, I'm the player and the coach I am today because of you.
Well, that's nice to hear.
So, cheers.